Good morning. It's a Monday, July 18th. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. As you can see, I got to wear a necktie again. Stampede week's over. My excuse for getting out of semi-formal or business type attire is done, so I'm back to this throttling thing. Oh, well, it'll keep me good and crabby so I can keep my rants going well. So yes, this is our live daily show, Monday to Friday, 11:30 a.m. until around 1 o'clock. Usually a couple of good guests on, lots of ranting, cover some news stories. And it is in being live, we have that comment scroll, and I really appreciate seeing people interact on there, checking in from all over. Tammy out in Chilliwack and Mavis, Debbie out in Tabor. We're getting people from all over, and it just reminds me that I'm speaking to folks all over the place. I'm not just, yelling at the TV or the shower like I used to. So by all means, get on there, use it, talk to each other, get points out, send questions for the guests. I won't necessarily read them all out, but I do see them all, and it's helpful. Just keep it civil and don't spam the comment feed. I noticed somebody had gotten about 20 comments in just before the show started. I guess that's fine, but if you start rapid firing like that, we will have to mute you because it kind of removes the discourse from everybody else. So it's good to be passionate, but be courteous. All right, let's see what's going on for the observations of the day. What are we looking forward to? What's important and what's going on? Well, it's National Caviar Day. Here's one of those foods I just can't figure out. That it's a high-end delicacy. People pay a fortune, at least for the good stuff, for the beluga caviar and that. And I've tried it, and it's just horrible. Oh, I can't stand it. It's like squeezing fish oil to the back of your throat. But for those who love it, this is the day to love it, apparently. This is when you're supposed to observe and enjoy a caviar. It looks like there's some salmon and as well as a beluga sturgeon over there on the right, and those spoons. Either way, well, if you're into it, today's the day to enjoy it. It's also National Sour Candy Day. This one's a little more enjoyable, I guess. We can all remember eating those as kids, things like that, whether it's sour soothers or some of those balls and things like that. Maybe this is the reason they have them on the same day, so you can get some of that taste of that bloody caviar out of your mouth, get on a sour candy, and try and flush that forth. I mean, it takes a lot to get that fish taste out. I love sushi and sashimi, but I still never got in on that flying fish roe they stick on some of those rolls and everything too. I never could get into that part of it. But whatever. If you enjoy that stuff, today's the days for it. Okay, I got a couple of good guests as always. David Krayden's going to come on in a little while. He writes a lot of columns for the Western Standard, of course. He's our senior parliamentary guy, always has some good, strong opinions and a good sense of humor and some good discourse. So we'll bring him in to talk all things Ottawa to kick the week off. And then Linda Slobodian is going to come on, and she's written, again, for Western Standard readers and subscribers, lots and lots of columns and news stories out of Linda. But she's also been at work for quite some time on a documentary on the debacle in Afghanistan, with Canada abandoning allies and making a complete mess over there. She interviewed a number of generals and people involved, and it's coming close to being released. So we're going to talk to Linda about what inspired her to get that going and what we can look forward to when that's released. All right, I'm going to get ranting, and it's a bit inspired by it's been ongoing. We've been having columnists and others talking about the residential schools, and a very interesting one from Jaime Rubenstein with some background on the Kamloops residential school and just some questions. Like, there's a lot of questions about what's been determined and assumed there. So I'm going to talk about what I think about some things. To begin with, if I found what I suspected to be human bodies on my property, the area would be taped off and police investigators would methodically excavate to determine if there are indeed bodies, how many bodies are there, and then try and determine why and how the bodies ended up there. I couldn't tell the police, hey, I found some burial mounds on my land and I have some neighbors who assure me they contain the remains of murdered children. I just want to see, though, apologies from those accused of killing these children and compensation for those potentially related to those children. Aside from that, though, I don't want you on my land, and those mounds must remain untouched. The scenario I read just sounds absurd, but that's exactly what's happened with the Kamloops residential school issue. It's been 14 months since ground-penetrating radar identified anomalies in what was once an apple orchard next to an Indian residential school in Kamloops. There's no evidence, aside from the GPR anomalies, of graves being in that location, aside from anecdotes from people who attended the school decades ago. There's no record of missing children, no families identified who lost children during the period of alleged burials, no attestations of burials from the many Indigenous people who were actually employed at the school at that time. It's all based on stories that children told each other of secret nighttime burials happening in an orchard over 60 years ago. I worked with ground penetrating radar when I worked in the Arctic. I spent 4 years up there. We used it to determine ice thicknesses on the Beaufort Sea so we could safely travel on it. And for that application, GPR is fabulously accurate. What GPR does is it records differences in density. Water and ice have distinctly different densities, and the GPR can easily determine ice thicknesses. That said, we didn't rely 100% on our GPR data. We had protocols requiring regular measurements of the ice thickness with an auger and a long measuring rod to ensure the accuracy of the GPR survey, and we'd have to calibrate it at times. That's it, though. It doesn't provide snapshots below that. It doesn't give a 3D image of what's going on underground or underwater. It can only tell you that there have been changes in density. For graves, GPR could work well. A hole that's dug and filled in even decades ago could show distinctly on a GPR survey. The thing is, though, many other things can look the same way. An old trench for irrigation would show up as an anomaly every time the GPR passed over it. An old shed site, or even outhouse sites, or pathways where the ground got impacted could present as anomalies. Old root beds from former apple trees would look much like burial sites, for an example, as well. Our nation was turned upside down over the anomalies registered on a GPR unit. Our flags were kept at half-mast for nearly 6 months. Churches were burned, apologies were offered, and billions more in settlements are pending. Why on earth are we not verifying the data from the GPR survey yet? As far as can be seen, not a teaspoon worth of dirt has been moved to try and determine what happened. Hey, maybe there are remains of hundreds of children who vanished and they're secretly been buried by residential school workers. In that case, though, I want to see the bodies exhumed and a criminal investigation carried out. Maybe there's hundreds of bodies of Spanish explorers down there and it was a valuable archaeological site. Or maybe there's not a single body in the area and we need to re-examine just how much weight we're going to give to anecdotal oral history on serious matters. Until a true forensic investigation is done, we're left with nothing but speculation. If such a crime has happened, wouldn't the relations of the victims be eager to get a full picture, find the facts, and of course pursue those responsible? Why are we waiting on this? And I fear the answer may come down to money, as so many things do. The mystery is a lot more lucrative than the reality might be. There are a lot of people making a whole lot of money from the residential school issue, and they don't want it to go away. That pipeline of cash would come to a halt if it was determined there was never actually a mass murder of children. It's time to start digging, because this is too serious to keep putting things off. That's what's got me up and going today, guys. We really got to find out what happened there. I'm not saying something didn't happen. We don't know. Yet we're assuming. We're settling. We're apologizing. We're giving money away on this. And it's not helping. It's dividing us further. So it's time to get on with this. All right. Let's see. Let's check in with Melanie Risden and see what's happening on the news front. Hey, Mel, how's it going out there?
Really good and really busy today.
Okay, well, I can imagine after a weekend, we always have the build-up. The Monday check-ins are the easiest ones to put together.
They really are. There's a lot going on right now. We have a story up on the website right now. Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan preparing to roll out the vaccines for preschoolers and toddlers. Not everyone agrees with that. We've got another story up. Suncor Energy is entering into an agreement with activist investor Elliott Investment. Ontario NDP leadership election rules are playing identity politics. It looks like the signatories for each person, each candidate needs to include at least 50% of signatories need to be women, and 25% of them need to be somebody from a racialized group. So we've got that story up right now. BC nurse has been suspended for creating fake vaccine cards for people. So we've got our BC reporter Reed Small who has covered that one. The CRA is claiming prosecuting tax cheaters is taking way too long. So that's up. That's from our Black Box reporter. Department of Health has lost thousands of computers. That is apparently going to be a hefty bill for that, and how you lose computers, I'm not 100% sure. Looks like our Prime Minister has a new haircut, which people are sort of talking about right now, but apparently a new poll says the Prime Minister is plummeting in support. So those stories up. We also have a story around a police shooting that happened that killed an armed Saskatchewan man. And quite a few things in the works right now. We are looking into a story This one's out of New Jersey, Cory. It's a woman, a transgendered woman who was put into a women's facility. She's now been transferred to a men's facility because she has impregnated two women in the women's facility. We also have our reporter Jonathan looking into how the Canadian government is looking to, or calls to the Canadian government, looking to make good on long-standing promise of a centralized mental health crisis line. So that would hopefully sort of bypass the police and be a direct line people can call, similar to health services, things like that. And we also are looking into a Manitoba doctor who was censored and fined for his counsel to his patients, also prescribing ivermectin to them. And it looks like our reporter Matt is going to be diving into a story about menstrual changes that have significantly been affected by many women. And this is sort of a story that's kind of come and go, but it looks like this is actually bigger than has been reported on as of yet.
All right. Well, lots on the go, lots out there, and lots coming as we kind of anticipated. So I'll let you get back to hammering away there in the newsroom and putting that out. And thanks for giving us the update, Melanie.
Absolutely.
All right, so that is our Melanie Risden, our senior reporter here in Calgary. She's always out there putting the content. Don't forget her interviews. She does some great stuff out there, actually a number of ones that have been very well viewed. Check our YouTube channel, our Rumble channel, our Facebook, and you can see some of the stuff Melanie's covered out there. It's just been great. As well, beyond that, all those stories, as you heard, all those different reporters being named, you keep hearing more and more people being out there. That's because we are in expansion mode. We have new folks coming on. We have people in BC, Ontario, Manitoba. We got them all the way, across the country. We are the Western Standard. We haven't got anybody in the Maritimes, though we do like, talking. We've got Arthur, who's our Alberta guy, but he is from Newfoundland, and he certainly keeps a close eye on it. And the reason we can do that, just to remind everybody, is because you guys have taken out memberships. So if you haven't subscribed already, guys, please do. This is how we can stay independent. This is how we can do this kind of expansion and cover these stories that the legacy media will not cover, and we don't take a taxpayer's dime. $10 a month, $99 for a year. You can get a free trial. It's well worth it. It's how we can keep doing this and keep providing it. And people have been coming through. It's like a newspaper subscription. I mean, it's really not that much. And they've been coming through in the thousands, and that's how we can do this. So thank you if you've subscribed. And if you haven't already, come on, guys, get on there and take out a subscription. I mean, you can do it for less than playing World of Warcraft every week, I believe. So you get a little more value out of it. That's hard to say. But it depends on whether you're a horde or not. All right, let's look at some of the other stuff. Yeah, some of these stories, like that one in New Jersey, and we heard about it, and it came up again, was the trans, woman who impregnated other prisoners in a woman's prison. Like, I try to be tolerant. We try to be broad-minded. If a person's happy or trans, great, by all means. But we're getting to that point of denying physiological reality. We got to get back to reality. And in the sports, they've overplayed the hand. It's getting so nuts. And Joe Snake, just a minute, a commenter, saying, don't start mouthing off Maritimers. Alberta will be, hooped without us. Yes, Joe, no, I'm not trying to mouth off the Maritimers at all. I was saying we just don't have a presence out there because we're kind of Western and growing out that way. As I said, we got Arthur out here, from Newfoundland, who's doing a great job writing for us and stuff like that. It's just that we have a Western focus. I'm not trying to, I love it when I see people commenting in from out on the East Coast. There's a lot of good common sense people out that way. So I interject now and then when we get the commenters, but like I said, I like to see that, hey, call me out when you see something. That's fine. We'll talk. So, it's Jack Gordon saying impregnated is the new euphemism for rape. I don't know. I mean, if you stuck a person like that in a prison, and I might as well say he impregnated people. This isn't misgendering, maybe it was voluntary. I mean, the bottom line is, there are people together in close quarters, but whatever the circumstance is, he didn't belong there. This is that physiological reality part. I mean, we can recognize people as the gender they present at. Absolutely. We can respect that. Let them live as such and enjoy a full, great life. Great. But if you get in prison and you've still got the nuts and berries to be able to impregnate a woman, you are not a woman. I'm sorry. If you haven't gotten to the point of cutting off the parts, we're not going to indulge you when it comes to a woman's facility. That's absurd. It's ridiculous. And now, yeah, the investigation will follow with 2 female prisoners managed to get pregnant in prison. Come on, from this guy. And it was a guy. There's times when the line has to be drawn. We aren't being intolerant. We're being realistic. And that applies to the sports as well. And we're seeing it. I think maybe we're finally realizing some of it has, crossed the line. We're going to get the pushback, especially with that dude who's swimming around, taking over all those women's swim meets. And there's some athletes who've been speaking up, saying, enough is enough. I mean, this guy is, towering over the people competing with him and has a clear physiological advantage. But and as well now, when we get to women in prison, though, and you're sticking biological men in with them, you're putting the women at risk. You're putting the women in prison at risk. Maybe it's just wrong on so many levels. How did this possibly happen? How far and distance have we got from just realism and common sense to think this wouldn't be a problem? Yet here we are. And it's just bloody insane. And speaking of woke, before I get to Mr. Krayden, and he likes ripping into the woke. I always appreciate it when he gets going on them. I've just been watching the Starbucks thing unfold as well, and I guess there was a leak, and their CEO, Howard Schultz, blamed basically woke elected officials in Democrat-run cities because suddenly they've closed 16 Starbucks stores. And he basically called a spade because they're all in cities like Seattle and Portland. I mean, that was the heart of Starbucks. And the problems they had, and that was some of the discussion was, well, if you might remember from the news there were so many homeless people coming in and shooting up in the bathrooms and everything. They were trying to maintain security, and they said customers only in the bathroom. And they got a backlash. Oh, how intolerant of you! How evil of you! Oh, you're pushing these. So trying to be woke, Starbucks said, okay, you know what? We'll allow anybody to use the bathroom anytime. Well, of course, unfortunately, when you have addicted people coming and going in downtown bathrooms in Democrat-run cities, they will probably defecate everywhere but in the toilet. They're leaving syringes all over the place. They're overdosing in there. And as the employees were saying, they're not social workers, they're baristas. So rather than address the problem, well, they can't. They're in out-of-control, crime-ridden cities. They're just closing the stores. And I guess part of the reason that there's a bunch of unionization going on in these Starbucks too is due to working conditions. Again, these guys wanted to make happy faces in a latte, not drag inebriated or totally wasted meth heads out of a bathroom and try and maintain control in a Starbucks branch. You see, why does it happen to Starbucks? Because they've embraced the woke. They wouldn't allow common sense to come into their business model, and now they're paying the price. The saying always applies. It's an accurate one. Go woke, go broke. So sorry, Starbucks. I never really liked your overpriced coffee anyways. You're just reaping what you sowed. I wish you the best of luck if you clean up your act and follow business reality, but if you're going to keep pandering to these lunatics, you're going to go broke. All right, let's bring David Krayden in from Ottawa and see what's happening out there. I'm sure there's more insanity to cover. Hey, David, how's it going?
Good, Cory. Nice to be with you again.
Yeah, thanks. Just getting my morning rant on for the week,
I just wanted to make one comment before we proceed with my stuff. Good for you on that story about the male prisoner who was going berserk with the female prisoners. I got so fed up when my stories used to be changed when I would describe the biological male prisoners as he or him, and my copy came back as she or her, because I just would never go along with labeling these people as what they weren't. I mean, as you said, and unless they go through with this whole sex change procedure, I am not going to call somebody who wakes up one morning and says, I feel like a woman today. It's just ridiculous. And whether it's sneaking into the woman's change room or going to jail in a women's facility, this is absolute nonsense. And for people to be calling you or I or anybody else who objects to this as transphobic, I mean, this is just such a ridiculous term, which is meaningless to begin with. I mean, we're not even, it's a Freudian terminology that implies that we're afraid of these people. We're afraid of this phenomenon. And really, what I'm afraid of is that more women are going to be hurt by these men pretending to be women, and it's a phenomenon that's affecting not just prisons, uh, not just female facilities, but there's this joker in BC who likes to hang out at places where women have their pubic hair shaved. I mean, this is gone into all elements of society, and it's just sickening. So,
well, that's it. I mean, we try to respect people, and again, if somebody came, presented, said, "This is how I want to be addressed," I respect a person. That's no problem. But when we get to differences such as women's shelters or prisons, well, we just have to address biological reality now. Not it's not being disrespectful. It's just pointing out the facts.
yes, on with the show.
Only gets crazier as we go. Okay, well, speaking of crazy, I'll start kind of with your most recent column that's gone up was the mandatory COVID testing is returned, or it's going to return to the airports. What on earth are we doing?
Well, we had a bit of sanity as summer began, and a lot of folks were saying it was not just as a result of the airport saying, "Please give us some relief from these lineups," and even that didn't give much relief at places like Toronto, as I was saying in some of my columns, and as I related when I came out to visit you all in Calgary in June. It was just a nightmare getting through Toronto. It looked like, as I said, a massive flop house. People just sleeping everywhere, and like about half a mile long of suitcases that never ended up with their owners, and it was just a nightmare. Even though they stopped doing these COVID testing, and they apparently started again without any explanation as to why. And there seems to be this generation again to go back to where we were with COVID testing. And it's all started, I think, with this crazy health minister we have, who's had COVID-19 twice this year. He's on his fourth dose, which now he considers to be the norm, to be up to date with your vaccines. And he's the same jackass who said that we should be getting this thing every 9 months for the rest of our lives. I've seen people around the world say, nobody's saying you should be getting this regularly for the rest of your lives. Well, yeah, we have somebody in Canada who's saying this. And this seemed to be the impetus for increased testing and back to insanity at the airports. And of course, we're talking about this next wave, and they're calling it the ninja wave. Like, this sounds really threatening. It sounds scary, but of course it's not. It's even less dangerous than the flu. And I keep asking, Cory, and I've only heard a couple of people mention this. Why are we getting a vaccine for the latest COVID-19 variant that was manufactured for the first variant 2.5 years ago? It's really quite ineffective because it wasn't manufactured for the latest variant. So we're getting it for something it wasn't made for. And maybe that's why Trudeau and the health minister keep getting COVID-19 over and over again, because the vaccine isn't working. And yet there's ample evidence out there, as our Ottawa parliamentary bureau chief did with his excellent series of articles and the research he did. Matthew Horwood, I really take my hat off for those articles he's done, and the feedback he got from so many people who said, yeah, I've got a story to tell about the adverse reaction I got from my COVID-19 vaccine. I had 2 of them. I went out and got them. I thought it was a public spirited thing to do, but I'm not getting any more because I've heard enough, I've read enough about an adverse reaction, and I'm certainly not going to get them for the rest of my life. I'll tell you that. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, the things go on, and we'll see what happens. I just feel for the tourism sector and the others and people trying to get around. I mean, they thought they were getting a break because, I mean, yeah, that alone won't solve all of the problems at the airport, but this was an easy one. It's this testing and stuff like that, and the mandates. I mean, we know now at least they're not changing and they're not protecting anybody. So let's just set them aside and get on with allowing the economy to recover. But this government is so stubborn. They have to be pushed off everything they do.
I don't think even in Canada people are going to sit idly by and welcome another lockdown from coast to coast, or even in Ontario, where I sit right now. I don't think people are going to put up with another lockdown, because it's just, people see through this stuff now. They don't think politicians have the public's good in mind anymore. They see this as another power grab. They see this as just plain authoritarian politics. They don't think the government's doing this because they're saving lives, because lives quite clearly aren't being saved anymore. Just about everybody's had this thing, and they get through it quite easily. And we don't need to be shutting down restaurants and gyms and walking around in masks and treating this like it's the Black Death. And that's, the government loves this because it allows them to get tough and allows them to clamp down on businesses. They don't seem to realize that every time they do this, it shakes another bit of resistance out of this country, and it's slowly squeezing the life out of Canada, and it's very dangerous, especially given what's happening in the world right now. We're coming very, very close to a food crisis, a food shortage around the world, and with the inflation, with the high gas prices, with everything else that's happening, we do not need another COVID lockdown. Absolutely not.
No, that would be devastating. I mean, unfortunately, when we look at the intellect of our leadership, I mean, it's just, every time Trudeau does make international headlines, and I've seen it now in Britain and I've seen it in the United States, it's Justin and his brilliant haircut. And I'm not trying to be no vapid on just the gossip front and everything, but look, this is a prime minister who built his reputation around his beautiful hair, his flowing locks, the only asset he ever really had, and he went and chopped it off in a Dumb and Dumber haircut. But I mean, they wouldn't make the mockery of this man too if he was known for intellect and he just changed his hair. It's also because people see it's not just the hair, it's that blankness behind the eyes that makes him look so much like Jim Carrey from that movie. But you also reported on Justin's appearance in Calgary, for example, at the Stampede. Like this guy doesn't win respect anywhere he goes.
Everywhere he goes now, he draws a crowd, but not one approving of him. He draws a protest, like a bee draws, like honey draws a bear. It's amazing how unpopular he's become, and even people who are not political seem to realize that Justin really is an unpopular prime minister. I think probably the most unpopular prime minister we've had in modern history. He certainly goes down with anybody I can recall in my lifetime. But the thing at the Stampede is quite amazing, because we picked up on it at the Western Standard, not just myself, but some of the writers there, that there was something fishy going on here, and it was immediately apparent to people on social media. There was so much on Twitter. People noticed that it seemed to be trumped up. These stories that were on CBC and Global and other mainstream media stories about Trudeau being mobbed, like it was the Fab Four at the Stampede, like the Beatles were there, or it was Elvis or Sinatra, and he was just being mobbed by his fans. And can we have a selfie with you? And thank God you came to Calgary. We love you here. It just seems so unreal. And it was. Clearly, these people were staged. They were there because the Liberal Party put this thing together, because these things just don't happen for Justin Trudeau anymore spontaneously. He doesn't show up at events and people just are so glad to see him. They come running to the stage and want pictures taken with him. This might have happened in 2015, but it doesn't happen in 2022. And the mainstream media reported this like it was just one of the greatest events in Trudeau's career. And of course, the real reaction was that people were cussing him out and saying Trudeau the traitor, and Trudeau you're a communist. And that was underreported. That was basically a few malcontents in the crowd. One, crazy old guy with a sign saying, Trudeau, you're a traitor. That was dismissed as the odd people in the crowd, the very, very few people in the crowd, when in fact, those were the people who were really representational of the feeling in the crowd. And it's very disturbing, once again, how the state media, the mainstream media, the people working for the Trudeau dollar, the ones who get the subsidy from the Trudeau government, are acting like government propagandists. And it's like something out of, I always joke, CBC watching the triumph of the will again, because it's like something you see in Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia. They put the stuff together, and it just doesn't reflect reality anymore. In fact, you might argue that the stuff they put together in those countries reflected reality more than it does here, because Trudeau is simply not that popular with people. He has really outlived his welcome in this country, and certainly at the Stampede, when he puts on his cowboy hat, it's not a popular sight. No.
And the polls are starting to reflect that a little bit. Actually, he's showing his, across the country. I mean, he's never been popular in Alberta, but he's getting less so everywhere else. I mean, people have kind of had enough. We see even some ostensibly sort of leftist center columnists who've been finally saying, we've kind of had enough of this guy. The Liberals play cutthroat politics, I mean, as hard as any party does. And as much as they've been rallying the troops and keeping their discontent from within, I'm sure there's got to be some Liberals with some ambition now. We're starting to chomp at the bit saying, okay, it's time for this guy to move aside, and time for me to move up and try and take the throne there in Ottawa. I mean, how long do you think Justin can hold this together as popularity starts to sink?
Well, as I said last week, and I've been saying for a while, he would no longer be prime minister if this was Great Britain. Not just the Tories, but the Liberals or the Labour Party would have gotten rid of him a long time ago under the same parliamentary system. They're just more used to doing that than we are in Canada. I think his support's going to crumble first with the New Democrats when they say, do we really want to have ourselves tethered to this guy for another 2 years, because we're going to go down with the ship with him. So I think he's going to lose New Democratic support first, but I really think he might face an internal caucus rebellion, because Trudeau is not going to go easily, simply because he's such a narcissistic individual. He is such an arrogant individual. And I don't believe he's going to wake up one day and say it's time to go. He will stay as long as he possibly can. But I do not think we're going to see 2 more years of Justin Trudeau. He will try, I believe, to win another majority election within the next 6 to 12 months. That's my guess, based on the way Trudeau thinks, not of reality, but of himself. He really does think he's a miracle maker, that he is destined to pull one more majority out of his bag, and he can do it because he's Justin Trudeau. And he survived everything in the past. He survived financial scandal after financial scandal after financial scandal. He survived the blackface scandal, and he still has the gall to call everybody a racist, and does it without any sense of irony. And I really think he believes he can do it again. But I don't think he's going to get away with it one more time. I think Canadians are fed up with his lecturing, his hectoring, his me first attitude, and his Canada last attitude. And just his hypocrisy. It's the gross hypocrisy. And the fact he just can never admit it is gross hypocrisy. He's much like Joe Biden that way. He just can never say, I've really screwed up on this. I've really, really done wrong. He can't do that because he never thinks he has done wrong. It's part and parcel of being a Trudeau. And he's a Trudeau writ large.
Yeah. Well, he's at the apex of his career, whether he knows it or not. Like, it's not like he can leave that spot and practice law or take over a large company and manage it effectively or something like that. His options after this job are limited. I mean, he'll never be worrying for putting food on his table, but I could see him clinging to that role as long as he possibly can.
It's the United Nations for Trudeau after this. There's nowhere else he can go. He would be very welcome there because there's lots of people like Trudeau there that are the idle rich with woke politics and with crazy ideas, and they can sit there for the rest of their lives making other people's lives miserable.
Well, he'll be doing what he's good at, I guess. So before I let you go, what are you working on for this week? Always lots to cover, of course.
Well, I was going to for today. I was going to do a summation of Trudeau's weekend, which was always interesting. Of course, he ran into a lot of bad press as usual, but I'm also looking into doing something on a protest group that is working on what Trudeau is doing to our farmers in this country. We're talking a lot about what's happening to farmers in the Netherlands and Germany and Italy and all across Europe, but Trudeau is doing the same thing here in Canada, and farmers are going to have to be prepared to demonstrate and protest just like they are, because he's taken fertilizer away from our farmers here in Canada too, and we're going to have a food shortage here in Canada if we're not careful and if we don't fight back. And once again, it's all about climate change, phony climate change, and it's Trudeau's variation of the Great Leap Forward. He said he admired China, and I think that's one of the facets of Chinese history he admires as well. And it didn't go too well for China when they took that great leap forward.
Yeah, well, the Canadian fertilizer story has been sliding under the radar. I mean, some people are reporting it, but not nearly enough. And we'll keep shining a light on it and hope maybe somewhere some common sense comes in. And as people watch what's happening in Sri Lanka or the Netherlands, or even now it's starting to spread to Germany and Italy, this woke attacks on farming, our source of food, people won't stand for it. It's just too much. We got to be able to eat.
Right on.
So, okay, well, yeah, thanks for checking in. I'm looking forward to that story and seeing what else you come up with, and keep, cutting to the core with us through from Ottawa there in your columns, David.
Always a pleasure, Cory.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Bye for now.
Okay, so that was our senior parliamentary columnist, David Krayden. And yes, he's prolific, lots of columns out there, and they're always a great read. And as you can see from listening to him on here, he doesn't hold back. His writing is much like his speaking, and you'll get straight to the point with those things, particularly when it comes to talking about our leadership with folks such as, yes, Justin Trudeau. What a piece of work that gentleman is. All right, let's look into a little more new stuff. And I also, for some of the folks commenting on Rumble, I have a separate scroll for that. Good to see you there, Lone Warrior, talking about the Pope coming out to apologize yet again. Yes, it just never seems to stop. Jaime Rubenstein's got a column coming out talking about that. And I see G. Tilley and Beaver Lodge checking in there. Good to keep those comments going and talk about stuff, guys. Another thing with getting green in Europe and how insane the green movement is. I mean, they're insane. They really are. And so, I mean, look at Germany right now. They are in energy crisis. They got so dependent on Russian gas. They shut down their own coal. They're shutting down their nuclear plants. They spent, I believe it was $500 billion, like that amount of money on green transition over the years. They were the poster child for green. Everybody was telling us, we've got to be like Germany. We've got to be like Germany. We've got to move that direction. Well, now they're screwed. And they still don't get it. They still have plans to shut down some of their nuclear plants. They don't know how they're going to power their country, but they're carrying ahead with shutting down their nuclear sources. It's madness. But this is what the green woke world is. This is, as David said, Trudeau will move on to the UN where he can speak with other imbeciles who don't have to deal with reality, or the World Economic Forum. And we suffer, but people are standing up, and we're not hearing nearly enough about it. The Dutch farm protests are fantastic, and I found it interesting. We did a video. We've been posting shorts on TikTok, and some of them have been taken off, 6,000-7,000 views, just my short rants and everything. But the one I did on the Dutch farm uprising, your average one out of me gets 6,000-7,000 views, sometimes 10,000 views. That one got under 100 because Well, the Chinese owners of TikTok, I imagine, just didn't want to see that one spread. It tripped an algorithm somewhere. We've never had one that low. It hit a record low. Nobody wants to talk about that. But we're attacking our food industries. It's insane. But going further, the EU now has declared lithium to be a toxin. Think about that. A couple of things. For one, lithium, I don't think it's that commonly used anymore, but it was a big breakthrough for antipsychotic medications. So in that form, in a small volumes, I don't know about toxic. Anything is if you take enough of it, but it's had some uses. But the bigger use for lithium is, of course, for batteries. I mean, it's supposed to be a massive new lithium market opening up. If you were going to move on to this crazed push to electric vehicles, that still isn't happening, by the way. They're still a novelty. They're still an expensive little car off to the side that some people use to commute downtown in virtue signal. It's not getting anywhere to spend, despite billions and billions being spent trying to force us into those things. We need, if we're going to do it, massive amounts of lithium. And what's the EU doing? They're moving towards banning lithium. What on earth are you going to do? You're going to get a bunch of rubber bands? Is that what the next car is, where you wind them up, like the little toy cars, and make them zoom? We're running out of sources, guys. You're banning everything. And people have to push back. Obviously, we're not going to get common sense from the lunatics at the head of the EU, at the head of the WEF, at the head of United Nations. You need people on the ground to stand up and push back. That's why things are so rattled with the protests in the Netherlands that are now flowing over into Germany, that Sri Lanka overthrew basically their government. And in Canada, it was truckers who got pushed too far. But citizens are finally having enough. And this government's scared. All of these authoritarian governments are scared. That's why they stick grandmothers in prison interminably, like Tamara Lich, while they allow rapists and perverts to get bail. Our priorities are so skewed. But it's not going to change until we push back. We have to, because these guys won't listen to sense. It won't happen. So let's see what else we got going on here. Actually, I'm going to speak to one of our sponsors before we move on. And that is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Speaking of rights, speaking of things that this authoritarian government wants to take away from you, your firearms are a big one. Your property, your lawfully owned firearms, whether you're a hunter, a target shooter, collector, it doesn't matter. It's your business. But this government does not want you to have these things. They want to take them away from you. And they're going to. They're going to succeed if you don't push back, if you don't stand up for yourself. And one of the ways to do it, safety in numbers, join an association. And that's what these guys are about. And hey, it's not just lobbying. You get all sorts of value as a member of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. There's resources on safe firearm use, sporting events, trade shows that are coming up, all sorts of things like any other association. I just always go on to the pushing for rights part, though, because it's the most important one. They are standing up for you. They're pushing back against this government that is finding every excuse to try and take away your ability to safely, responsibly, legally use and own and transfer firearms. So if you own firearms, or if you respect somebody else's rights to own firearms, or if you're considering owning firearms, join these guys. You have to. It's a must. The Canadian Shooting Sports Association, their website's cssa-cila.org. They're easy to find if you just Google it, Canadian Shooting Sports Association, and stand up for yourself to keep your property where it belongs, in your hands. All right, let's see some of this comments. Victor pointing out, post-millennial column was, or an article was done about the archaeological evidence dug and conducted by Simon Fraser archaeologists, and it didn't find any bodies. And that was covered as well on Western Standard. I'm not going to keep pushing people towards the post-millennial, but they do good. They're alternative media as well, of course. But that same story, we are covering this stuff, guys. And we've got it going on. Jaime Rubenstein, if you look that up, if you look up the stuff on the Western Standard, he went deeply into that. And yes, pointed out, and we had pictures, all sorts of things in Jaime's piece. It was very long and intensive. Just a second here. I remembered my water this time before the coughing fit hit. I get things caught in my throat. Go into there. It shows pictures, a lot of very interesting things with that Kamloops site. Like there was a septic lagoon, for example, that was dug and created over 30% of the area where this apparent cemetery is supposed to be. Well, when they dug that whole lagoon back in, I think, the 60s or 70s, you'd have to, there's a big, long piece that Jaime did. They didn't find a single body. How can you dig acres and acres out of this apparent big, crowded cemetery and not find a single body? They also dug across, there were trenches and pipes and things going through there. Not a single body. Archaeological digs were done, as was pointed out by the commenter, in that area, archaeological ones, because it is an archaeologically significant spot. There are some old shells and things from people who were there thousands of years ago, but no bodies. Nobody's found a body yet. And again, I'm not saying they aren't there. I'm not saying there was no abuse in residential schools. I'm not saying residential schools were a good idea. I'm just saying when we are going to turn our country upside down over something, we should be obligated to investigate, get to the bottom. And this is ludicrous. As I said, where else, when a criminal action happens, do you not have a criminal investigation? It's as if I found bodies in my yard. I said, yeah, but I don't want you cops digging around in there. I just wanted to give you a heads up on it, maybe get some compensation. No, if there was a crime committed, let's get in there. Because there's still surviving people who worked in those schools, took part in those schools. Maybe they're going out there unpunished. Maybe they haven't been brought to justice. Well, then let's get down to it. And that surprises me. Why, if you're so eager to have these people brought to justice, do you not actually want an investigation into it? Seems we just want to leap to the conclusion and leave it there. And I won't leave it at that. Neither will Jaime or Brian that I've brought on or some of the others, Tom Flanagan. No, we've got to speak up and we won't be shut down. And here's an interesting one from Shane Wenzel. Yeah, it's time for a change in Canada. A common sense leader and a common sense party has to emerge. Yeah, I know. We've been waiting a long time, haven't we? I'm not sure what it'll take, but we got to keep pushing. There's something, we get a lot of cynicism and I put out a lot of anger and grumpiness. I put positivity now and then too. But the thing that can hurt us is cynicism. We just got to watch for that. Don't throw up your hands and give up. You're guaranteed a loss. It's pretty hard to win. It seems like you're pushing against a brick wall at times. It seems like you're wasting time. But if you don't do anything, you're guaranteed to lose. So you got nothing to lose in keeping trying. Part of it, though, is having open discussion. And that's one of those areas that, again, we push on a lot because we get afraid of, because we've got all these moves, C11, C18. The government wants to control information. They want to stop the discourse. They want to stop the discussions. And there is where we are going to lose. We have to keep the communication channels open. Keep pushing, keep talking, keep finding ways. As I said, we get kicked off YouTube now and then. Go to Rumble. Facebook, they demonetize us. That's fine. We didn't make much there to begin with. We got other routes. If the government's slamming on information, I like to think it'll shatter. We're still going to find it and communicate with each other elsewhere. And we will change things back for the better. I just think they're going to have to get a lot worse before they get better, unfortunately. But we've got to keep trying, guys. Let's see. And here's an interesting one. This is when I start to think our bureaucracy is truly falling apart. Something I've always kind of said is the only area where the government's efficient is with CRA, because when it comes to taking our money, boy, they suddenly find efficiency, or at least ambition. If you want to find, if you feel lonely and your phone hasn't rang enough, go a little long on a GST payment, yo. Don't worry, you'll get a lot of company. You'll get a lot of phone calls. I said it before and I'll say it again. I'd rather owe Tony Soprano money again than having fallen behind on a GST payment as I did some years ago. And then the oil crashed. It took me a while to pay it off. And I paid it off. Fair enough. It's a bill of my own. But holy cow, those guys are like jackals. They just won't lay off. And but now we're seeing that apparently the outright tax cheats. This is a CRA report. The prosecution of cheats is taking too long, and they think some guys are going to beat criminal charges due to lengthy delays in the investigation. Well, when CRA can't even efficiently operate anymore, when the government arm of stealing your money out of your pocket can't operate any longer, or even get the money out of the people who really did dodge taxes unfairly, man, that bureaucracy is in trouble. I've been hearing more of that talk going on. People realizing this bloated institution, this world of dependency on government, we built it. We kept voting for, I want government to do this for me. I want government to do this and this and this. Well, what do you expect? You got a giant, ugly bureaucracy of lazy union maggots laying around, making excuses for taking more money and doing less work. And it's gotten so top heavy, we're getting so far in debt, it will collapse. It's going to have to. We're going to have to cut it down to a fraction of what it is. But they can't even renew passports. They can't do anything right. And our healthcare, people get their mental, the way they look at things so backwards when it's a matter of, this is so important, I can't entrust it to anybody but the government. No, you're backwards. If you got something that's really, really important, the last one you should entrust it to is the government. So yes, you don't want them having a monopoly on healthcare. You don't want them. This is what I keep going back to as well with capital punishment. I know we get those battles with my commenters. I don't support it. Why? Because I don't trust our government. to get it right or to impose it for the right reasons. I'd like to see real life sentences. I'd like to see cell doors welded shut for some of those sick buggers, and I want them to die of old age in prison. But I don't want to give this government the ability to kill citizens because, again, this government is incompetent. It is corrupted. It is, look what we're doing. We got Tamara Leach locked up, a grandmother, for fundraising a bit and organizing on a protest. Even if somehow there should be charges at the end of that, this is not a person who needs to be incarcerated for months at a time leading up to a trial. This is a minor offense. And you want to give this government the ability to kill people? I don't think so. I want them to have as little ability as possible. But yeah, getting to the CRA thing, apparently it takes 18 months to get to trial typically with the CRA. And of course, often then people have a defense saying, well, the evidence is stale and we just can't do it any longer. So we'll see, But don't ask for more out of government. Don't trust the government. Like Wendy's saying, government is the last to trust. And Pat King, Mavis Cole saying, Pat King got out today. He's been in for months. He's on bail. We don't know much else about it. That's kind of something interesting with it too, is the publication ban when it came to his trial. It is strict. You are not allowed to, even if you were a reporter who watched the trial online or got access to it or was a lawyer, they're not allowed to talk about what the rationale was or what was agreed upon or anything. It's all secret. It's a gag order. It's a publication ban. Whatever happened to public trial? I mean, that was the whole point. That's why typically anywhere, actually, if you go to any courthouse, it's open to the public. You can walk in, go in there and take a seat within that court. There's limitations. You can't videotape, take pictures or harass people or things like that. That's why you always had those court reporters, with the artists having to draw the pictures. But to have these bans, what are you hiding? That's what does make me think you're hiding something. I mean, Pat King, as an individual, I don't know. I think he's a little bit nuts. But it doesn't mean he needs to be locked up for months at a time. It's way an overreaction. And, same with the Tamara Leach and all the others. Oh, this is interesting from Cheryl. So, okay, I don't know. Is she saying the publication ban was requested by King's lawyer? Okay, perhaps. At the same time, I don't like it. It's public trial. Whether the defense wants to not have evidence shown, I don't think it's their place either. I mean, and I'm not going to say Pat's anything like that, but let's say then it's a violent, vicious, nasty criminal who did something really horrible, and they don't want it to get public. Well, too bad. You're in trial. That's the way it goes. We hear the evidence, we the public, because that's how we will judge, theoretically anyways, our politicians and such. So we're going to try, I think, to dial into Linda Slobodian. And hey, Larry, haven't seen you in a while. Larry, you're nuts too. But I'm glad you're tuning in. And I'm glad you're still as crabby as ever. Hope things are okay in Blackie. All right, so looks like we got Linda Slobodian on the phone. We're going to talk about the documentary that she has put together, and it's going to be coming out really soon. She's been working very hard with Nico on this, and it's about the debacle in Afghanistan. So let's see if we can get Linda dialed in here. And we should have some sound right away, and I'll be able to hear from her and talk to her. So, hey, Linda, you out there? Well, should be popping in right away, I think. And we'll discuss that documentary. As we remember, that happened last year, months and months of warning, knowledge that things were going badly in Afghanistan. It was falling apart. You knew the Taliban was going to come in to take over. We had alliances with people who were helping out, whether it was even just around the base or around, embassies, things like that. Local Afghani people or translators, of course, were commonly used. And we abandoned them. We bolted. We ran with our tail between our legs. And we knew for months. I mean, the liberals were warned. People were warned. Military people warned them. And Linda spoke to a number of those, spoke to a number of retired generals. It's in the documentary where she speaks one-on-one. We can't pretend we didn't see it happening. And we did a terrible, terrible disservice to people who were helping us out there. And, sorry, I look at comments as well. I get ranting sometimes. And, left them hanging in the bag. I mean, these are people end up arrested, tortured. It's the Taliban, guys. These are some scary, scary folks. So I think I heard a little something there. I might have Linda on the line. We're just kind of dialing her in. You hear me, Linda?
I can hear you a little bit, Cory.
Okay, I got you now, Linda. Good. Yeah, we're just a few technical issues getting you on board, so I've just been kind of rambling about the background of the documentary you put together. See some commenters, Jet saying you're a great news hound, and people really appreciate your writing, so they're really looking forward to your documentary.
Well, I really appreciate our readers. They are loyal and smart.
Yeah. Well, most of them, anyways. Some of them like yelling at me, but that's half the fun on our comment scroll. I won't drag you down into that.
Yeah.
So I gave some background. I guess I'll start. You've been working on this for quite some time. It's almost ready for release. What kind of inspired you to dig in and put all this together?
I was in Afghanistan right on the heels of 9/11. I visited Kandahar, did a 12-mile trek across the rugged terrain from the Iranian border, and visited the American troops there and I met the Afghan people. I saw the conditions that they lived under, the women being, having to cover themselves in burqas, little girls just being allowed back into school. Fast forward, the Allied forces moved in, human rights were restored, not completely, but a lot. Women shed those hot, horrific burqas, and little girls went to school, and here we are back again. The burqas are on, girls are banned from school, and the Taliban is hunting down anyone who helped the Allied troops with a vengeance.
And it's just so horrible. I mean, and 100 and some Canadians died, over the period of that time in Afghanistan trying to fight, and many other soldiers from countries all around the world, just to end so disgracefully like this, right back where they were. And again, I think a lot of what you cover in the documentary is that those who helped us, we've abandoned them.
Yeah, and Cory, we lost 158 Canadian soldiers, and thousands more came back wounded physically, mentally, spiritually. They went out there to fight for these Afghans who stood beside them against a common enemy, the Taliban. And what it has resorted to these days are the Afghans who were promised safety and protection for helping the Canadians. Over the past year, they've gotten auto replies and buried in paperwork and told to get to Pakistan. But in order to get to Pakistan, they need passports and visas issued by the Taliban. So it's just been a vicious circle. But along the way, all throughout this whole, prior to Biden, U.S. President Biden pulling out of Afghanistan last August, there were generals and military people and Canadians warning the Canadian government that the Taliban was advancing, that things were weakening for whatever Allied troops remained, and nothing was done. I mean, the biggest response was our ambassador Reed Sears disappearing on a half-empty plane after Kabul fell to the Taliban, abandoning people who had shown up in droves to the airport. And we have some of that in the video. The airport was bombed, and it is very gruesome. Nico and I were very selective about what we chose to display on the video, but it was dire. But the generals, the retired generals, did not give up. They have been fighting. And what is unique about this video, Cory, documentary rather, is that so many retired generals have come together on one platform to appeal for help. Most of these generals served in Afghanistan alongside these Afghans. and they've not given up.
No, well, and I mean, they understand more acutely than anybody. They spent the time there, and the importance of those, relationships you build. I mean, it's not a matter of just going into a country and shooting things up like in Rambo movie and taking something over. You're there to try and make positive change or have relationships. As one of our commenters, Lorna, has pointed out a couple of times. I mean, now, how can countries trust anything coming from American or Canadian military forces when they go into a country? They've done so much damage on that front as well, aside from the immediate human damage.
Well, General Lewis Mackenzie of Bosnia fame, who is in the documentary, he said that this Afghan abandonment is the first time that he felt ashamed of his country.
And that's tragic because, I mean, Lewis Mackenzie is a very well established, as you said, a general and Canadian. And we're seeing clips. I don't know if you can see them, Linda, probably not. But Nico's pulling up some parts from all of the interviews you did, running them in the background. And as you said, you're not trying for something sensationalistic. You and Nico were very careful with the editing to make sure there's not gore, but you don't want to understate just how badly people have suffered because of this withdrawal either.
And the documentary explains why. This is a hard time for Canadians with inflations and gas prices. People here are trying to get by. But the documentary explains why these Afghans should not be abandoned, what they did. Many of them, they are why many of our Canadian soldiers who were ordered into Afghanistan by the government, they are why many of them made it home. They shared a common goal to defeat the brutal and crushing Taliban. They stood beside Canadians shoulder to shoulder as interpreters, cooks, drivers, embassy staff at great risk, and they are literally being hunted down. The Taliban have taken to showing up with arrest warrants, and what follows that are if they find their targets, what follows are tortures, executions, and people just disappearing. And the situation has improved a little bit, but it's still a trickle. It's not a flood of people getting in. And people in the know are saying that the 2 years that Immigration Minister Sean Fraser has said that it will take to get the 40,000 Afghans Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised safety to in Canada, 2 years is unrealistic. Some of these people don't have until tomorrow.
No, and this issue has been kind of quiet. We haven't heard a lot about it lately, though. It's kind of coming back up in the news again.
Yeah.
So it's just important, I guess, not to let people forget. We have, well, it's been such a crazy couple of years too. It's easy to kind of let some things go into the background of our memories, but this one, I mean, the issue's still ongoing, and we can't forget those right now who are suffering today. And also, we should just hold some people accountable for what caused this in the first place.
Yeah, I believe that there must have been people, working in immigration who were very devoted, very dedicated, tried their hardest, but the obstacles that were put in place, the need for these, and not to say that people shouldn't be vetted, but many of these people that the generals and Afghan strategic evacuation team, which had a number of Canadian organizations under their umbrella, they knew who these people were. They had been vetted. So to go through that crazy process and keep them trapped behind enemy lines, just no sense, no rhyme or reason. And it really is a shame.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's a good piece, and it's coming out very soon. We're just polishing off the last of the edits on it, and it's I believe it runs about 40 minutes or so.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I, appreciate you putting this together, of course, and just coming to talk to us because it's coming up soon. And I just want to let our viewers and listeners know that this documentary is coming out because it's an important one. I mean, it's not me and my rants and things like that. This is much more nuanced and speaking to experts, speaking to people who've been there, including yourself, and shining a light on this. It's really going to be important for a lot of people to watch this.
And to remind Canadians that in spite of the obstacles put in their way, in spite of the dithering, as the general said, that there are honorable Canadians who will push to the end for the right thing to be done.
Well,
and they used to wear military uniforms.
Yes, and it's good to know people aren't giving up. It's kind of like I was saying earlier before you came on. It feels futile. We can get cynical. We can get tired, but it's just important to keep pushing because we'll lose for sure if we give up. And then there's still people to be saved over there.
Okay.
But all right, well, thank you very much, Linda. Maybe we'll talk a bit again after the documentary is released, and hopefully some people will be paying better attention and knowing what's going on out there.
Okay, Cory, thank you very much.
All right, great talking to you, Linda. Thank you.
Take care.
So that was the Western Standard's Linda Slobodian. Our regular readers know that name. She puts a lot of stuff out, writes on a lot of provincial affairs. But again, Linda's a veteran journalist who's done work all over the place, as she said at the start, in Afghanistan herself. We're not working on anecdotes or people who don't know what's going on. She spoke to a number of retired Canadian generals, including Lewis Mackenzie. And as you can see, it's called Abandoned but Not Forgotten by Canada's Generals. Those generals are speaking up and working to ensure that this issue does not go away. So watch this show, watch the Western Standard, and as soon as that's ready to go live, we are going to let you know. And, set aside some time to watch that documentary. Nico and Linda have worked on it for quite some time, and it's really something else, something different for us. We haven't really gone into documentary type productions here at the Standard, so this will be the first one of that sort. And for starting for a first one, it's an important and a great one. All right, let's see what else we got going on as we wind things up here. Here's an interesting story. I think that was mentioned by Mel when she came on earlier. With Elections Canada paid researchers $84,000 for personality profiles of federal voters. And you've got a bunch of data. I'm kind of mixed on this. As long as they're not using that money to try and figure out how to better campaign, for liberal benefit, but they're actually looking at voter patterns, that's kind of potentially within their bailiwick. You see things like the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Association. They get studies trying to find ways on behalf of the Liberals to tax the equity of your home. That's disgusting. It's a waste of our dollars, and it's scary to think what the Liberals are coming after. But this might be okay, and there's just some interesting numbers within it. Voter demographics, and they break it down to 9 different persons that included change makers, immigrants who definitely vote every chance they get, and feel impatience towards people who express strong political opinions yet don't vote. There's one of the things, some people get concerned about immigration and things like that. I think we get a lot of immigrants who come in, especially if they've come, unfortunately, from places that were in a lot worse condition than Canada, and they do get frustrated with our apathy. They do get frustrated. Why don't you get up and vote? I mean, they came from countries where they either aren't allowed to vote, or you got to fight for the right to vote, or the elections are truly so corrupt that the voting's pointless. And here, where we have it so good, we get out there and we're not bothering voting. Or Eastern Europeans, we get so many great, conservatives who come out from there because they've lived through the dictatorships. And people in Central America, Africa, they've been in the dictatorships. They know the signs. We've got the ability to change things, so they get frustrated. Some of these terms they used, champions or electors over 45 rated as determined, outspoken, and vocal about the necessity of voting. And they feel excited and hopeful about electing a candidate. These are typically over 45. Followers, this is an interesting one they categorized. And that's young Canadians under 25 who are not very attentive and typically uninformed if it wasn't for social media feeds. They typically don't vote or attend a polling station. Then there's individualists, and they're Canadians. They hit all ages. They study platforms and likely express their frustration on Twitter and Facebook, and they consider voting to be a requirement. Idealists, oh boy, usually under 34, and they think their vote can make a difference. Planners. Skeptics are another one, though. Yeah, they keep up with the news, but vote only haphazardly. And I know that's what I'm talking about, the frustration, sometimes of feeling like it's pointless. It says Lauren and Nico saying off topic, was anybody been sent letters from Stats Canada to do a labor force survey? I haven't seen that one yet, but Statistics Canada is always pushing things, and I haven't seen that one. But I mean, I imagine they're doing more surveys. That's their role. And I'm kind of mixed on Statistics Canada. Hey, I like digressing on things when subjects come up. If you remember, the big national census that would happen every year. Many years ago, I got worked up with that one. The problem I have with the census is that they tell me I will be charged if I don't take part in it. They make it illegal for me not to take part in it. And I got in a big battle with an ex many years ago. I still think to this day, because they gave up, she filled it out on my behalf and gave it to them because she was getting upset. But the census takers kept coming to the door. They would come literally there because I had the extended package and this big long thing, and it was asking me ridiculous stuff about race and how many toilets I had in my house and all sorts of stupid things. And they were telling me I would be charged if I refused to do it. And I filled one out too with just a bunch of stupid data and made stuff up and said I was bred by aliens and I had 90 toilets in my bedroom and things like that. And of course that got rejected and they got pissy. If they just asked, if they just asked, I would have filled it out accurately, because I think it's important for government to have those numbers and know some things for policy modeling and things like that. But because they said they're going to bring the law on my case and make me do it, well, now I'm not going to cooperate. Now I'm going to dig my heels in. Now I'm actually going to do things even to sabotage your numbers. This country doesn't respect individual choice or rights. Boy, we certainly know that more than ever right now with the last 2 years with what we've gone through with the pandemic and things. But likewise with the pandemic, likewise with things, as I've said, and now I'm sick of it. I'm not going to do a vaccine, a booster every 9 months for the rest of my life. I need to see better evidence. But I mean, if you want me to take part in medical things, ask me, reason with me, talk to me. And I'm much more inclined to take part. But when you put the gun to my head, now I'm going to struggle. This government doesn't seem to understand that. And maybe not enough people seem to understand that. Guys, don't keep cowering every time the government tries to force you to do something. You got to push back. It doesn't mean you end up in jail like poor Tamara Leash, and so on. There's different levels of where you want to rebel and push back. But here's some of the things that gets me a census too. Like Jet Gorgon saying the census wanted salary and name of employer, etc. And he said, no. Yeah, it's intrusive. But the other thing that gets me is you guys have all that information. You have it through CRA. You have it through my healthcare card. You have it through my driver's license. I mean, the government on so many levels has all the information about me already. How many times have you got to keep asking? How inefficient and wretchedly disorganized are you guys that you've got to keep hounding us and forcing us to give you that information over and over again and in more detail? Why don't you guys look within your own bloody departments and get it? Because you've got it. And this is where we're at. Census. So either way, they're looking for more stuff. I'm mixed on it again, getting some more information. Like I said, not every bureaucrat's evil, though I think most of them are. Not every initiative is really meant to step on us, though again, I think most of them are. Just try to respect us a little bit for a change. It would be really refreshing. And you'll get a lot more cooperation out of guys like me. Here's a CRTC report. And the CRTC has been getting more and more invasive with the powers being given to it. It's good to look up if you search out Peter Menzies, who took part in it, and he was chair of it, and he was a publisher with the Herald for a long time. But he's also speaks openly on what's gone on in the CRTC and what's led to, or what the CBC radio. And it's not what he signed up for initially as a journalist, and it's just turning into a controlling arm of the government. Now, there's a report saying that the next 3 years will determine whether the Canadian TV system survives or not. And, research points to a loss of viewership and advertising to internet broadcasters like Netflix and YouTube. YouTube like we are as well, of course, and others. Fine. I mean, we kind of already knew that. You didn't have to be a media expert to understand why legacy media and conventional media is having a hard time paying the bills these days. It's changed dramatically. It's hard to get on there and watch Little Mosque on the Prairie when I could put on Amazon Prime or Netflix and see productions far more entertaining than that and indulge. But what worries me is they feel perhaps that they can interfere with that natural change in viewership and force us to watch other content, then we got a problem. They shouldn't be looking at this as a way to preserve old Canadian broadcasting TV. They should look at how we can evolve then and just make the market broader so that we have more options within Canada than that are within streaming services. We got to accept the fact that the dinosaurs are gone. Where they're going, we got to let them go. End the tax subsidies. Let it happen. I mean, think of how bad and backwards things are. In Calgary, we've got Signal Hill. It's a spot over on the west side. And that's where the CTV studio is and a whole bunch of radio towers and all sorts of stuff. They built all of the broadcasting centers up there and the TV and the radio because it made sense. You had to get to a high point because you were sending out radio and TV signals to everybody to get to them. Well, fine. And they're still there. There's still studios up there and things like that, just because the building is there, the infrastructure is there. But it also lets you know how old-fashioned things are. And this is why you can't fix a lot of the existing outlets and publications. You know, look at the big Calgary Herald building on Deerfoot. You can see it, that big brick building, and it's for lease, and nobody's ever going to lease it because it's so specialized. It's made for running loads and loads of printing presses and wheels of paper and all that you just don't need anymore. And that infrastructure just can't be used for anything else anymore. And nobody wants a dinosaur of a building way up on top of a hill because they don't need a big antenna on a high spot anymore. It's all streaming now. We're doing this in the standard. We take up a quarter floor of I guess closer to half a floor now of a modest office building downtown, but still have a studio and all the works. And we've got people across the country doing it. Our overhead's a fraction of what those places were. We can't fix the old dinosaurs. It's too big. Let them go and let the new ones evolve. Get off our case. Quit trying to control us. We will evolve and give you good local content. Or if we don't, you, the subscribers, will tell us to go to hell and we'll go broke. That's the perfect way for it to happen. We're accountable to you. If you all stop, if you really dislike me, get out there, guys, Larry, the rest of you, and get the people to unsubscribe. And don't worry, I'll be gone soon enough. But in the meantime, we're accountable to you. So either way, when they're doing these studies and they're realizing that conventional television is going by the wayside, I just hope they're looking at it the right way. Don't look at it as a way to preserve something that's out of date and gone. You're not going to bring back VHS. We're not going to bring back television, guys. Cassettes aren't going to be handy again anytime soon. So let's figure out how to evolve. I don't mind studying it if you're looking to move ahead. But I worry with this government, they're always looking at ways to control, and keeping that archaic old system in place helps them control, including the CBC, of course. That's the first one that should be going by the wayside. Again, let's talk about our government and their massive ineptitude at a high price. Yeah, the Department of Health, Melanie mentioned that. They lost track of thousands of computers, says auditors. Thousands of computers. You know, how? What are you doing? They found, 14,808 computers in the IT inventory and 20,000 in a database that were not identified. So they owned about 33,000 pieces of computer equipment, and they lost thousands of them. In other words, are they breaking? Are they being flushed down the toilet? Are they falling apart? No, they're getting stolen. Let's not beat around the bush. People are taking the laptops home. They got, again, inept government, these bureaucrats, the sense of entitlement. Screw it, I'm going to get home video gaming, a gift for the kid, whatever, format it and put something on, because they don't have good controls like a private institution would have. Track things down like that. I assure you, if I took more than 10 pens out of here, Derek could be phoning me later and giving me hell for it. Nobody's going to be stealing a bunch of computers out of the Western Standard offices. I mean, private industry is the way to go. And so think about this. These are the health people. This is why our healthcare system is a mess. Not because of the lost computers, but those are a symbol of how badly managed the health departments are. These bloated bureaucracies. People don't understand why a lot of us keep talking and pointing to the healthcare systems that far surpass Canada's. And Canada's is dropping all the time. It's nowhere near the best in the world. Far from it. And every system that's better than ours, every one of them, not most, not some, all of them allow more private provision of care than ours. We have a government-enforced monopoly. So these people, again, who can't track down tax cheats, the people who can't renew your passports, the people who misplace thousands and thousands of computers, yet some people say those are the best people to run your health care? God, I don't want a bureaucrat trying to take my appendix out. They'd probably take off one of my testicles and then blame me for it afterwards. We need to change the system, and we need to get some proper private competition in there to fix this crap up. All right, here's another one. Yeah, This is where we need French to save Canada. Yes, this is a federal briefing note for a cabinet bill. So apparently, here's some of the backwards think of our federal politicians. You know, we've had a country that's got unity problems been going on since before I was born. Predominantly, it was a secession issue in Quebec, but there was an unrest in the West since the beginning of Confederation as well. I mean, if you look at the old milch cow cartoon, you Google that, you can see 115 years ago, the issues were the same in the West as they are today. They're screwing us. But one of the things that's always annoyed us was, of course, the constant pandering to Quebec because they were always threatening to go. And now you see, they feel if they can push enough French on the rest of us, they can save the country. Guys, it's your pushing of French on us that has divided us all the more. It's made us sick of you. It's made us want out. It hasn't endeared us. No amount of French you shove down an Albertan or a Saskatchewan or Newfoundlander's throat is making a Quebecois separatist feel any more inclined to stay here. And it's not making us feel any more inclined to stay here either out in the West. But it doesn't matter. This is where they're going. They're looking to push into privately business. This is the problem. Private businesses, federally regulated private businesses, C13. Force more French. Come on. God, nobody even reads it on the cereal box anymore. Cut it out. Quit wasting our money and dividing us. But they won't because they're fools. They're blinded. You're not going to unify us more by jamming this on us. If it hasn't worked in 60 years, guys, it's not going to work tomorrow. Let's see. Here's some fun. I'm going to finish off with, I like my music that I crank up and the harder stuff and the louder stuff. I'm a long time heavy metal fan. You know, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, hey, these are the guys I grew up with. And you still listen to that stuff, or I do. My mullet's gone now. I don't wear those T-shirts anymore. I don't have any up there. But I like some of that stuff, and even some of the newer things, Rage Against the Machine. I just like cranking some of that up. It's good to listen to and relax and shake the windows in the car when Jane's not with me. She wouldn't let me when I'm with her. And they were always unapologetically left-wing. That's fine. You know, they're left-wing reactionary. But when they get up and pipe off about this crap, you know, celebrities, again, talking about stuff they don't know, that's hardly new. But I guess at a concert in Canada, they went on about giving Indigenous land back. Yeah, this was at a Canadian concert, Rage Against the Machine, saying, we've got to give Indigenous land back. Okay. To who? How? Where? This is how ridiculous this call. I mean, when they call, you know what? One thing that gets under my nerves, I'm easily triggered on some things. There's a couple of things. If you want to get me really mad on Twitter or whatever else, tell me to shut up. Slavica learned that one out fairly well. The other one is, call me a settler. Settler. How the hell am I a settler? I had grandparents who were born in Canada. Both my parents were born in Canada. I mean, when you say settler, you're already implying then that I don't belong here. You're saying I have to go somewhere else. Where the hell am I supposed to go? Where the hell are all these settlers supposed to go? Because that's what you're saying. Give the land back. To whom? When? Which tribe? Which band? Which nation? Most of the prairies were populated by nomadic people who are Neolithic hunters. It's not an insult. It's just the reality of what stage of social and economic development they were at that point. They weren't farming yet. They didn't have a written language. They didn't have surveyors. So how are we going to divide this land and give it back, as you put it, hundreds of years after the real settlement and colonization happened? This crap, and it's crap, it's not just Rage Against the Machine. You hear it from idiots like Elizabeth May and other left-wing activists all over the place too. This is what divides us. This is what annoys and frustrates us settlers. So we're basically, it's the same attitude of saying, go back where you came from. That's what they're saying. And we don't accept that out of anybody else, nor should we. We can't, we see those examples of racism. We do see that when somebody's getting in a battle at a convenience store and yells at a person of Indian descent, go back where you came from, or any other visible minorities. We won't put up with that. We shouldn't, because it's odious and it's disgusting. But somehow we put up with it for Rage Against the Machine and from other leftists saying, give it back and go back where you came from. And I didn't even come from somewhere else, so I'm kind of out of options, guys. But that's where the dialogue is. We got to live today, guys. Quit hanging up from back then. Quit pretending that we can turn that clock back. How far back do we want to go? Where can I get some compensation? And am I going to get over there and get some from Italy for when the Romans occupied parts of Europe, or the Inquisition when they were cracking down on Jews. I don't think the Spanish are going to give me any money. So, we're on the Scottish side again from Hadrian's time up there. No, it's not going to happen. Let's move ahead, people. I'm not a settler. I'm a Canadian and an Albertan, and I'm just here. And I'm sick of that rhetoric, and I'm sick of the division, and I'm sick of the identity politics. And you guys aren't doing anybody any favors, even though you call yourself progressive. All right. Well, I got an interesting one tomorrow. Make sure you tune in. We're going to get on to some of the provincial UCP race, and of course cover a lot of news and things too. But some of it is Raj Sherman with his race or his run for the UCP, even though the UCP said they're not running, he's not running for them. So it's kind of bizarre. Raj Sherman's a doctor. He was also he was a PC MLA. He ended up crossing the floor over to the Liberals. He led the Liberal Party. He's an interesting character, to say the least. But he still seems to be pushing along with his campaign somehow. And John Horsman, he's another fellow who's put his name in. He's from ATB originally. And he's going to be running for the leadership of the UCP as well. He's one of the non-MLAs. And I believe he's coming in studio. So that ought to be a good conversation. So looking forward to that. And just to answer one more question, Brad Haugen saying, are you a Nickelback fan, Cory? Yes, actually, I like them. I don't think they're the best band in the world, but they're pretty good, and they make some good tunes to listen to. So, all right, thanks for tuning in today, guys. I will see you all at 11:30 a.m. tomorrow.